I am the owner of Ashford Corporation. For the past 11 years, I have regularly worn a cleaning staff apron to observe the hidden corners that an owner would never see. To me, that night, a powerful editor-in-chief kicked away my feverish daughter's bear-shaped hand warmer and insulted me, calling me pollution. She didn't know she had just fired her own boss. I'm telling this story to prove one thing: kindness is a choice, and arrogance always has a price.
I remember exactly how far it slid. 4 feet, maybe 4.5, across the marble floor of the grand salle, before it stopped against a floral arrangement that cost more than most people's weekly salary. A stuffed bear warming pad, pale yellow, the left ear slightly darker than the right, because my daughter had drawn a smiley face on it, with a brown marker, so I could find it fast. In the dark, when she cried at night, I watched it slide. I did not move. Nora had a fever of 102 when I left the house that evening. I had tucked the warming pad under her blanket, told Mrs. Patel next door to call me if it climbed higher, and driven to the Ashford Hotel, in the clothes I keep in the back of my car for these visits: worn work pants, a faded blue shirt, the kind of apron the cleaning staff use here, that I had asked the facilities manager to set aside for me. I do this 4 times a year. I have done it for 11 years. Most of the staff who work these floors have never seen my face, outside of a company portrait on a wall somewhere, and the ones who recognize me understand, without being told, that the point is for them to behave as though they do not. Tonight I had been here 2 hours. The Grand Salle was hosting a launch event for a magazine. Helena was editor-in-chief. I had come in through the service corridor, through habit, through the particular attention to detail that 11 years of these visits had built into me. I was mopping near the east wall when I heard the heels. You learn, doing this work, to hear the difference between heels that are moving towards something and heels that are moving towards someone. These were moving toward me. She did not look at my face first. She looked at the warming pad on the floor, beside my supply cart, where I had set it so the heat would not press against the plastic of the cart, and then, without breaking stride, without looking down, she kicked it. One motion, hail, 4 feet across the marble, and then she looked at me. What she said, I am not going to repeat word for word, not because I have forgotten. I have not forgotten a single word, but some things, once you say them out loud again, give them more air than they deserve. What I will tell you is this. She said my presence in that room was a contamination. She said people like me had no business existing in spaces like this. She said it loudly, clearly, in front of 40 people who had stopped what they were doing to watch. I looked at her while she spoke. I did not look at the floor. I did not look at the 40 people. I looked at her, the way you look at something you have already decided about, and I waited for her to finish. When she did, I straightened up, and I said, quietly, the value of a person does not live in the shoes they wear. It lives in the way they treat the people standing in front of them. And right now, that is not going well for you. The room went completely silent, and then Helena Voss did what people like her always do when someone refuses to shrink. She reached for the one weapon she believed she had. You're fired, she said. Get out of my event. I heard the words, and I thought, not about Helena, not about the 40 people watching. I thought about Nora, 8 years old, 102 degrees, sleeping in a bed with a cold left side, where the warming pad should have been. I thought about the smiley face on the left ear of the bear that was sitting against a flower arrangement 4 feet away. I bent down, I picked it up, I straightened, and I waited. Comment. Have you ever had to stay completely still while someone thought they had won? Because what happened next changed everything for every single person in that room. Nobody moved. Not the waitstaff by the east wall, not the journalists near the bar, not the 40 people who had just watched a woman in a $1,200 dress fire a janitor in front of everyone. Nobody moved. I stood in the middle of the grand salle with a stuffed bear in my hand, and I looked at the room, not at Helena. At the room. I have been in this building for 11 years. I have walked these floors as the person who owns them and as the person who cleans them. And I want to tell you something. I have learned doing both. You see a room very differently when you are the one holding the mop. The faces of people who believe they are being watched, look one way. The faces of people who believe nobody important is watching look completely different. That night, I had been watching those faces for 2 hours. I knew who laughed too loudly when Helena entered the room. I knew who stepped back when she walked past. I knew who smiled at her and could not hold it all the way to their eyes. I looked at a woman standing near the second pillar, dark blazer, notepad in her hand. She had not written anything in it for the past 20 minutes. I had seen Helena walk past her earlier. Lean in, say something close to her ear. The woman had nodded, and her hand had gone still on the notepad. It had not moved since. I recognized that stillness. It is the stillness of someone who has learned, through repetition, that moving draws attention. And attention, in certain rooms, is not safe. Helena was speaking again. I was not listening. I was looking at my watch. 9:47 p.m. Nora's next dose of medication was at 10:30. Mrs. Patel would remember. She always remembered. But there is a difference between someone else giving your daughter her medicina zeche, tragic, and you being the one who sits on the edge of her bed and hands her the cup. My wife used to do that before she got sick, before the 18 months that followed, before the morning 3 years ago, when Nora woke up and the house had a different kind of silence in it. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what was actually in my head while Helena Voss was talking. It was not strategy. It was not patience. It was Nora. The door opened. Not the service door, not the catering entrance. The main door, the double one, with the brass handles, that the concierge only opens for guests of a certain level. Martin Hayes walked in. Martin has worked with me for 14 years. He is the kind of man who does not show surprise, not because he does not feel it, but because he decided long ago that his face was not a place for things to happen publicly. He saw me from across the room. In approximately 1 second, I watched him process what he was seeing. The apron, the bear in my hand, Helena still talking, 40 people watching, and then Martin Hayes, Chief Executive Officer of the Ashford Group, walked across the marble floor of the grand salle, stopped 3 feet in front of me, and bowed. Note a note, not a handshake, a bow. The way you bow to someone when the room needs to understand, without any other words, exactly who they are looking at. The room understood. I heard it. In the specific quality of silence that only happens when 40 people stop breathing at the same time. Helena had stopped talking. I did not look at her yet. I looked at Martin, gave him the smallest nod, the one that means, I have this, you can stand down. He stepped back, and then I turned to Helena Voss. She was standing exactly where she had been standing when she kicked the bear, but she was not the same person who had done it. The expression, the particular architecture of certainty that powerful people construct across their faces, over years of getting away with things, was gone. What was left looked younger, smaller, like something that had been relying on a very specific version of the world, and had just watched that version end. She looked down at her hand. She was still holding the unsigned termination notice she had been preparing to use on me. She looked at it. The way you look at something you picked up without thinking, and have just realized you have no idea what to do with. Then she looked up, and for the first time that entire evening, she looked at my face, not at the apron, not at the bear, not at the mop I had set against the wall, at my face, as if she was only now seeing it for the first time. Who are you? She said. I looked at her for exactly 1 second, and then I did not answer her question. Not because I was thinking about what to say, but because her question was not the one that needed answering first. I looked away from Helena, and I looked at the room. I started on the left side, near the second pillar. Sara Okoye, I said. The woman with the notepad looked up. 3 months ago, you were preparing the quarterly editorial report. Helena reviewed it in front of your entire team. She called your analysis embarrassingly amateur, and asked the room if anyone else could explain why you still had your job. Sarah did not speak. She did not need to. The way her hand tightened on the notepad was enough. I turned slightly right. James Calloway, a man near the bar, mid-40s, gray at the temples, went very still. February. You flagged an error in the print run figures. You were correct. Helena told you to change the numbers anyway, and made clear that if you escalated, the error would somehow become yours. James looked at the floor. I had never met James Calloway before that night, but I had read his HR file. I had read all of their files. That is what these visits are for. I went through 4 more names, 4 more specific incidents, 4 more moments that had been documented, reported through proper channels, and quietly buried, because the person responsible was the daughter of someone important, because the structure of the organization had been arranged over time to make accountability feel more dangerous than silence. I had known about this for a while. I want to be honest about that. I had known, and I had not moved fast enough. That is something I will sit with long after tonight. Behind me, I heard the sound of someone lowering themselves to the floor, not sitting, kneeling. I did not turn around immediately. I finished what I was saying to the room. Then I turned. Helena Voss was on her knees, on the marble floor of the grand saal. The $1,200 dress pressed flat against the stone. Her shoulders were shaking. She was saying something about pressure, about targets, about what it takes to survive at this level, about how the industry does this to people, how it sharpens you into something you did not intend to become, and how, if I could just understand the circumstances. I looked at her, the way you look at an argument that does not hold, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the specific clarity of someone who has heard this particular explanation many times before and knows exactly what it is worth. I was not looking at her face. I was looking past her, over her shoulder, at the east window of the grand saal, beyond the glass, the city, 47 floors of it, lit up and indifferent, the way cities always are, during the moments that matter most to the people inside them. I thought about a conversation I had with my wife a long time ago, before Nora was born. She had asked me once if you could make one promise about the kind of company you are building, what would it be? And I had said that no one who works here should ever feel that the cost of their dignity is their job. She had looked at me and said, then make sure you mean it. When it's inconvenient, this was inconvenient. I meant it. I looked back down at Helena, and I said, quietly, so the room had to lean in to hear it. The people in this room, I have been afraid to come to work because of you. They have gone home at the end of days you made harder than they needed to be, and carried that weight into the rest of their lives, into their homes, into their families, into the parts of themselves that have nothing to do with this building. That is not pressure. That is not the industry. That is a choice. And it is a choice that ends tonight. Helena started to speak again. I said, a system built on fear has no future, and neither does your position here. The room did not react, not because they did not feel it, because some moments land so completely that the body needs a second before it knows what to do with them. I looked down at my hand, the bare, pale, yellow, slightly warm still from the heating element inside. I turned it over slowly until the left ear was facing up. The smiley face, brown marker, slightly uneven because she had drawn it herself at 6 years old. Very seriously, the tip of her tongue between her teeth, the way it always is when she is concentrating. I ran my thumb across it. Once. I straightened my apron. I turned toward the door. The marble floor of the grand saal is 62 feet from the service corridor entrance to the main exit. I counted the steps, the way I always count things, because the details are how you remember that something was real. Behind me, nothing. No voice, no footsteps following, no sound at all, except the particular silence of 40 people who have just witnessed something they will not forget. I reached the door. I pushed it open. Gently. The way you open a door in a house where people are sleeping. The cold air of the corridor hit my face, and the corridor was empty. White walls, fluorescent light, the specific stillness of a service hallway that exists only to move people from one place to another and has no opinion about what they are carrying. When they passed through it, I walked until I found the wall, and I stopped, and I put my back against it, and I let myself just stand there. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because I think people expect a certain kind of answer. They expect triumph, relief, the clean exhale of a person who has just won something important. What I actually felt was tired, and something else, something quieter, that I did not have a name for yet. I took the elevator down, walked through the lobby, nodded to the night doorman, a man named Gerald, who has worked that door for 9 years, and has never once treated anyone differently based on what they were wearing. I have always noticed that about Gerald. Tonight, I noticed it more than usual. My car was in the private garage, 2 levels down. I took the stairs, and when I got inside, I sat for a moment before I started the engine. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The apron, I was still wearing it. I reached back, untied the strings, folded it carefully, and set it on the passenger seat. I looked at it for a moment. A faded gray apron from the supply room of a hotel I built from a single property 23 years ago. There is something about that object I have never been able to explain to anyone who did not already understand it. The apron is not a disguise. It was never a disguise. It is a reminder. I drove for a while before I let myself think. That is a habit I have, putting distance between a thing and the moment I examine it. My wife used to say, I processed everything like I was filing a report, in order, without skipping sections, never starting the conclusion before the evidence was complete. She found it maddening, sometimes, and useful, sometimes, depending on the day. I thought about her on that drive home, not the way I used to think about her, the sharp, sudden way that grief arrives in the first year, like a step you did not see, in the dark, but the other way, the quieter way, the way she arrives now, less like loss, and more like a voice that has become part of how I think. Here is what I have never said out loud. Before tonight, what happened in that room was not about Helena Voss. It was not about the company. It was not about the 40 people who witnessed it. It was not about justice, though I believe it was just. It was about Nora, 8 years old, currently asleep, with a fever that has hopefully come down by now. My daughter, who will grow up and walk into rooms like that one, who will someday stand in a hallway, or a boardroom, or a restaurant, or an office, and encounter a Helena, because there is always a Helena, and when that day comes, I want the world she walks into to be one where someone, at some point, chose not to look away, chose not to let it continue because it was inconvenient to stop, chose to stand up, even in an apron, and say, this ends here. My wife made me promise that, not in those exact words, but in the way she lived every single day. She made me promise. Mrs. Patel opened the door before I knocked. Fever broke about an hour ago, she said. She asked for you twice. Then she asked for the bear. Then she fell asleep. I thanked her. I locked the door behind her. The house was quiet. In the specific way it gets quiet late at night, when it is just me and Nora, and the particular weight of a life that is smaller than it used to be, but not less. Never less. I went upstairs. Her door was open. She always sleeps with it open. Since her mother died, the nightlight was on. The pale, yellow kind. The same color as the bear. She had chosen the color herself. I stood in the doorway. For a moment, she was on her side. One arm out. The way she always sleeps. Reaching for something that was not there. I crossed the room. I sat on the edge of the bed. Careful. Slow. The way you move around a sleeping child, and I placed the bear, gently, into the space her arm was reaching toward. She did not fully wake up, but her arm moved, the way arms move when they find what they were looking for, and she pulled it close, and her breathing, which had been slightly uneven, the way fever sleep always is, evened out. I sat there for a while. I did not think about Helena. I did not think about what would happen tomorrow. The calls, the lawyers, the board, the press, all of that would come. All of that could wait. I thought about the marble floor of the Grand Salle, and the 4 feet a stuffed bear had traveled across it. and the smiley face on the left ear, and the way 40 people had stood in silence and watched something happen that they had needed to see happen for a very long time. I do not know if what I did tonight was enough. I do not know if one evening undoes months of fear in the people who lived it. I hope it helps. I genuinely hope it helps. But I know this: tomorrow morning, Nora will wake up, and her fever will be gone. And the bear will be there, and she will not know where it has been tonight. She does not need to know. That is enough. It has to be enough. There is a question I have been sitting with since I left that building tonight, and I want to ask it to you. Not about Helena, not about what I did, but about the room, about the 40 people who stood in silence while someone was treated the way I was treated tonight. I am not judging them. I know what silence costs. I know what it takes to stay quiet when speaking feels dangerous. I have been in rooms like that, on the other side of it. But I want to ask you, what would you have done? Drop un comment. I want to know. And if this story found you at the right moment, you already know what to do. I will see you next week. What I have for you then starts in a room even quieter than this one, and ends somewhere you will not expect.